Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined today by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Famico-Cahill, arts and features editor. Welcome, guys.
How you doing, Dave?
How you doing?
Pretty good. I was pretty psyched. We got some rain yesterday. That helped. Well needed. Everybody appreciated it. Hopefully you guys got some mist in your face and got to enjoy it.
Wee bit.
Nice. Very cool. Okay, well, let's dive right in. Thad, why don't you tell us what is on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, this week we have a story that's actually following up on a story we ran about a year ago, which is about local law enforcement agencies facing kind of increasing challenges, recruiting and retaining officers and staying anywhere close to fully staffed.
So yeah, in the article, I know you spoke with several of the police chiefs in the community, and can you tell us a little bit about how they're kind of framing this issue from their perspective of why they're running into these recruitment and retention problems?
Yeah, they say that kind of they face a myriad of issues of staffing, and certainly this is not just a local issue. This is a statewide and even national issue that police forces are just seeing increased retirements, seeing increased numbers of officers just leaving the profession, and in the midst of this, they're also having a harder time recruiting new officers into the profession. So again, not a local issue, but locally, they say that. One of the issues certainly is regional pay, doesn't compare with some other areas of the state, and with officers being in such demand, they really have a lot of I guess I would say it's a buyer's market for officers looking for work, and there's lots of agencies hiring. But then, the chiefs and Sheriff Hansel also spoke a lot about just kind of the national climate around policing, and what really a lot of folks say started with the so-called Ferguson effect in the wake of the police killing of Michael Brown in, I think, 2015 or 2014. And obviously this hit kind of a crescendo last year with the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the national protests that ensued. And so, there's really a feeling that police are under increased scrutiny, and there's, greater calls from both community members and lawmakers for better measures of accountability with police officers, whether that's civil lawsuits, prosecutions, or firing officers for cause. And they say there's just this national climate that isn't fostering people wanting to go into police work.
It was described as a perfect storm, even, right? I mean, all these conflating factors.
Yeah, so that's one factor. I thought Chief Ahern in Arcata had some really interesting comments about perfection really having become the standard in policing, and increased use of technology, especially body-worn cameras, making officers just feel like they're constantly under a microscope and constantly under scrutiny, both from outside the department when there's critical incidents, but also from within. I think the average person can't really imagine having a job where you're on camera all the time and your supervisor can, call back a moment of your day and say, let's look at how you handled this and talk about it. And so, they just kind of cast this as a lot of different factors that are just increasing stress on law enforcement officers, making fewer people want to enter the field, and really causing burnout among the rank and file who are in it.
So this was like a list. This was like a set of contributing factors, but some of the details kind of say, well, you obviously you could look at it from another angle too. Mm-hmm. So I think one of them, like you said, the perfection, the goal of perfection in policing. And in reality, I think that when people are calling for social justice, they're not actually calling for perfection. They're calling for accountability, for example. So there's some mitigating factors, and then also like the rates, the salaries. Do you want to talk a little bit about the salary discrepancy, or how that may or may not be actually? Some people are leaving the area because of lower salaries, but mm-hmm. So there were some comments in there that I think made it a little bit more fuzzy if that's actually a reason.
Well, yeah. So I think I think for kind of a microcosm of that, you can look at just pay rates within Humboldt County, and I think it's kind of while the sheriff especially is clamoring to raise deputies' pay and thinking that will have a sizable impact on his recruitment efforts. If you look at agencies in Humboldt County, the two highest paid agencies right now are Arcata and Eureka police departments, and both of them are also facing these staffing crises. While Ferndale, Rio Dell, and Fortuna are all either fully staffed or close to, while paying markedly less. So I think the starting rate in Ferndale is about $38,000 versus $55,000 in Arcata and Eureka. So that really, I think, indicates that some of these issues are about a lot more than just pay rate.
And they talked about culture of acceptance within the community. That's one, their perception, at least, that the community supports them versus maybe not so much in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, Fortuna Police Chief Day had a lot to say about that, of kind of saying that he feels like, that's a real recruiting card that he can play with, especially with lateral officers looking to make a lateral transfer, is that Fortuna at least has a reputation of being very supportive of its police force. I think, and he also says that, the department is known for kind of having a familial culture and a really supportive culture within the walls of the department. But I think it's also more than that. I think that you also have to look at just kind of the type of work. I mean, Fortuna has a different call volume and a different type of calls than say Eureka, or County, which is covering 4,000 square miles and patrol, and oftentimes in very rural areas. So I think it's really hard to pinpoint any one factor of why an agency or agencies cumulatively are having such a hard time recruiting.
Yeah. So this is obviously a bigger problem that'll get resolved, or at least, explored over time. But there was one element that I think stands out that we could address here a little bit as we kind of segue, wrap up this segment. There was talk that, Sheriff Hansel, I think, and possibly Chief Ahern both alluded to that there are roles that don't require roles the police currently perform that may not require a badge, and that's one path towards a solution. Can you tell us a little bit about what you heard on that front?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point where some of the frustrations within departments and outside departments in the communities are kind of aligned. Is that there's a feeling that police officers are called to deal with a lot of issues that aren't necessarily criminal matters, aren't police matters, from dealing with folks in mental health crisis to dealing with homeless communities and their impacts on kind of quote unquote quality of life issues. And so certainly, I think the police have a frustration of being routinely called out to these matters and not really having the tools to deal with them because they aren't criminal matters, and wishing there was, an army of social workers or trained psychologists ready to kind of deploy to work with, work with people in mental health crisis, work with people suffering from addiction issues, work with homeless residents to kind of mitigate their impacts and move them toward a healthier, more sustaining life. I think most of us agree that police officers probably are not the best equipped to go deal with these issues. And what Chief Ahern and Sheriff Hansel said specifically is like they're ready to hand off a lot of these calls to somebody else. Chief Hansel said, he recently had a deputy deployed to somebody's house who, for an incorrigible juvenile a 12-year-old who was refusing to go to school. And he was like, that's not a police matter. That's not something that a deputy needs to go to, but there's nobody else right now to answer that call. And so there's all these parts of society that are kind of breaking down or underfunded safety net services. And those calls right now fall to police because there's no one else. And both of them said that they are not only open, but like really proactively trying to work with other arms of government to find ways to move those calls to somebody else. And Hansel said it, I think most clearly, which is, look, if that means, funding another arm of government and, lessening the number of deputies that I have, so I don't have to respond to the calls anymore, then like take the money. Let's find a better system to do this with. And I think that's, again, where, a lot of the calls for kind of quote unquote defunding the police, which is really saying, let's take some of these functions that aren't best suited to police and fund them through other mechanisms of government. and have other people respond to these issues. I think that's where those interests really are aligning. And maybe in this staffing crisis, there's an opportunity for communities like Humboldt to think of better solutions and look at better ways to address some of these issues that, over the course of a couple decades now have increasingly fallen to police when, perhaps they're not the best suited folks to be responding.
That's incredibly insightful. So thank you. Hopefully this is something that we can move forward. Just the last thing is the article was primarily about recruitment. So I think as we wrap up, one thing was that, the county does have 12 vacancies, right? So there's space on their payroll that's going unfilled, basically. So that it is a true opportunity. But moreover, if you don't mind, Chief Ahern actually gave a real solid pitch. Do you want to tell us a little bit about his recruitment pitch?
Yeah, Chief Ahern was the most, full-throated in his pitch. To me, all of the chiefs I talked to kind of finished our conversations with a pitch, but his was, look, we're not looking for perfect people. We realize that everybody has flaws. What we want is people who are going to follow policy, follow the law, and be honest. And if you want to make kind of a big difference in your community, policing is a great way to do it. He called on, he wants to kind of build a diverse ranks of officers in the county. So he called on, communities of color, on folks from all walks who are interested in making a difference in their community to call him. I don't have it handy, but we printed his cell phone number in the story. And he's like, call us, we'll sit down, we'll have coffee, and we'll figure out if this is a right career path for you.
Personal cell phone number. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, when he said it, I was like, Chief, do you want me to print that? He's like, yep. I was like, all right.
Good luck, buddy, right? Like, go for it. You do you. Well, cool. Awesome. Thad, this was really insightful. I really appreciate your efforts on this. I'm sure there'll be a lot more coming in the weeks and months and hopefully years ahead.
Definitely an ongoing issue. Thanks, Dave.
Right on. How about you, Jennifer? What is going on the Arts and Features beat this week?
Well, I have been going back and forth with Colin Yo, our set list writer, our music writer, for a while about live performances. And, for a minute, we were back to having some performances before Delta really came at us. And, there have been things going on in the county, but after seeing how Delta was moving through the community and seeing, honestly, some of, the people in Colin's life here and in New Orleans where he lived previously, it was hard for him and for us, honestly, to go out and say to people, hey, you should go to this show, right? And so he's been reviewing music here and there where local bands are putting out stuff, either, online or, putting out everything from mixtapes on. And it's been good, but Colin has been jonesing for a live musical experience, and the Eureka Symphony afforded him an opportunity to give it a shot again. They had their 30th season opener, which is a big deal, at the Arkley Center for Performing Arts in Eureka. And they made it an event. The reason Colin felt like he could go and review it, and we seldom do reviews when you can't go afterward, but we really wanted to talk about the experience of going to see live music right now and what it's like. So he reviewed this performance, which required both a vaccination card and masking throughout. So you are sitting in this enormous high-ceilinged theater, but you are masked and everybody there is vaccinated. So he felt like he could do this and talk about it in terms of the experience. And surprisingly, not surprisingly, it went well.
Right.
It turns out that symphony goers, at least, are willing to follow rules. Nobody went Karen. Nobody freaked out. Nobody had a fit and unnecessarily called a short staff cop over their, rights or whatever. People showed up. One person had to go back to their car to get their vaccine card. That was the maximum drama, and this is saying something for Colin, made him very hopeful about both live performances in the middle of what seems to be the pandemic that won't end, and also in terms of our community and our society. Granted, the symphony is, as indoor music goes, is a somewhat easier sell. You don't have people yelling. Mosh pit's pretty minimal at the symphony. It is a different kind of performance, but it is still, a large indoor gathering. And for Colin's experience, at least, and from what I'm reading, it seems possible that we can run this in a reasonable way. There are ways that we can make, if our county, if our state won't make mandates, there are ways for entertainment venues to make their events safer, if not completely safe, right? We can't bubble everybody, but having vaccination cards and masking makes a tremendous difference and could make a tremendous difference in terms of what we can do again. If people are just willing, you're willing to take off your damn shoes at the airport. We're willing to do a lot of things, including that X-ray thing that I feel like is judging me. If we're willing to just make some, concessions, we could be back to enjoying things like live music again, with more peace of mind than we've had. There were that evening, by the way, he has wonderful things to say about the Eureka Symphony and its performance that evening, including Otis Harriel, who he says is a confident, highly skilled, and accomplished talent. He's a violinist whose life and career began in Arcata. So it's nice to see some locals. And of course, Carol Jacobson as the director of the symphony and its conductor. And, it's tremendous. We have this really great symphony here in our little rural county, and it can be enjoyed because they're taking these steps. It's kind of great.
Yeah, there was a lot of, like you said, there were a lot of insightful things about the performance itself, which I thought was a glowing endorsement of the quality, I guess, of our local symphony, which most people don't talk about that often, but I've been before. I really loved what they've done. So it's great to hear Colin out there and reporting that they're back in business. That's a good sign, and that we all could get out there. I think that's optimistic. One thing I thought was kind of hysterical, I have to say, is his byline at the very end, where he described. I have to read it. Colin, he, him, is begging the ghost of LBJ to rise from Hades and beat the ever-living S out of moribund Democrats whose recalcitrance towards progressive legislation threatens us all with a coming GOP imperium. He lives in Arcata. I thought that was hysterical.
Someday I will make a coffee table collection, or perhaps a gift book, of all of Colin's bylines.
Yes.
In which he has, I think, he's more or less challenged people to fight. He has called for a general strike. He does a lot. He's doing so much in the tagline.
I had no idea.
Always read it. If you haven't been reading, if you've just been like finishing to the end and then moving on, you are missing out, because it's like a novel.
It's like an Easter egg now, I know.
Yes, a little special something at the end.
Right on. Thank you for that coverage of Colin's story. And you are also covering a Halloween candy item, which I would love to hear you tell us a little bit about your insights on.
Yeah. So, I love to fight online. I love to fight online, but I also love to fight online about food. Poor Thad has been a victim of my mayonnaise trolling again and again.
I have, over and over.
By the way, update, it's not making him like mayonnaise anymore. I don't know. If that doesn't work, I don't know what will. But the big fight every year that I wait for, as soon as like the weather starts to cool off, the seasons change, and we come to fall, it's the fight over candy corn and all the people who hate on candy corn. And to that, I answer with this column, which is titled "Candy Corn Doesn't Care If You Hate It." Because candy corn, as it turns out, was invented in 1880, or first manufactured, I should say, in 1880, at the same time that we came up with saltwater taffy. So it was all about sweet. And if you've had like old-fashioned fudge, It is sweet. Like my teeth hurt right now. I can feel my fillings ringing. I feel the phantom pain of my wisdom teeth right now. But we apparently, as a nation, loved wicked sweet candy. And we kind of still do because candy corn persists. And yeah, so I go through the many reasons why it doesn't matter how much you hate candy corn. Candy corn will be around forever, long after we're, looking like the skeletons on people's lawns.
It's going to be cockroaches and candy corn.
Cockroaches and candy corn. And if you like it, if you can handle the sweetness of things like s'mores. S'mores are crazy. Can we take a second? S'mores are crazy. If you've met people from other country and seen them eat a s'more for the first time, they're like, what even is America? What is this madness? Cotton candy is insane. Since it's literally just sugar in another form. Jelly beans. What? American candy is crazy sweet. Charleston chews, all of it. But candy corn, gets scapegoated every year for being, too sweet, not having a flavor besides sweet, for being waxy, which fair enough. But as I state in my story, that is what makes it the frosting you can eat while you drive.
Oh, that's right. That's what
And, and I was thinking too, I don't have this in the story, but about how somehow in America and other places, of course, being able to eat really spicy food makes you like a tough guy, right? People are out here eating ghost peppers and Scotch bonnets and, being able to like shoot whiskey and feel the burn makes you tough. What about sugar? Like, what about my ability to like pound a box of Peeps before 10 a.m.? What about that? I feel like that should be also lauded in some way. But yeah, but those of us who can handle it.
Sorry, it needs a TikTok meme.
There needs to be a Peep challenge. I will be ahead of that trend.
Yeah.
But, those of us, I think, who love candy corn, at least as a seasonal item, should come out of the shadows and celebrate and, no longer be ashamed.
Oh, no, you got shockers. I was wondering.
If you've ever wondered what's in my mug at the office.
Oh, gosh. Well, you did say there's only 3 things you could do with it. I think one was eat one. I know you're chewing, but you want to tell us about your...
That never stops me.
Okay.
Yeah, you can sort of savor each candy and like make it last and like really taste it and try and figure out if there's any difference between the colors. There's not. It's just food coloring. Or you can just sort of like mindlessly eat it by the handful every time you pass the candy dish in your office or your home. Or you break it off and stick it to your canines and be a candy vampire, which I think we've all done, right?
Yeah.
You have to. Yeah. I'm going to do it as soon as we sign off. That's how I spend the day now that I work from home. But, candy corn also, like, there's this whole fall thing that happens every year, right? This big marketing push for fall and, like, especially toward women, especially this idea of homemaking and coziness and all this stuff. And I feel like in some ways, of course, seasonal candy is part of that, right? You've got your little, like, of course, it's made to look like psychedelic corn, right? But at the same time, it's trashy candy. It's the cheap candy. It's the, the plastic bags. I mean, are you buying name brand candy corn? No, you're buying like bin candy. You're buying the cheapest candy there is, the CVS candy corn. And there's no making it classy. It defies gentrification. And for that, I love the candy corn. It will always be drugstore candy. It will never be like, elevated. Nobody is going to make artisanal candy corn, or they shouldn't. They should be run out of town.
Yeah. This is a trip. This is a trip in part because it's like seasonal and it's appropriate, the whole like everybody's got a candy corn story. But I like, in closing, I like how you say like, hey, if you don't like it, there's people that don't like black licorice too, or black jelly beans or something. Like they've persisted and they're going to persist long after you're gone.
We're out there, Black Jelly Bean Gang. I see you.
Well, right on. This was fun. I appreciate you and your insights on, everything, but in particular, the candy corn. You got me on this one. I was cracking up. That's about going to do it for us this week. Thad and Jennifer, thank you guys so much. This was really great.
Thank you, Dave.
Good to see you.
North Coast Journal is on newsstands now. Pick one up. Stay informed. It's also available online all the time. Everybody, stay safe out there. Stay happy and healthy. And we look forward to catching up with you guys again next week.